Visitor person is Kimberly Voss, who is from Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville, and she is a journalism historian, oddly enough, given that we're looking at the collection here tonight. She specializes in telling the stories of women's page editors at metropolitan dailies post-World War II through the 1970s. And Kimberly makes wonderful use of collections like this, so she's a terrific person to have on this panel. Actually, her research at these various collections has resulted in a plethora of journal articles, historical magazine articles, and many, many conference presentations. Her book, Liberating Florida, Spreading the News of the Social Movement, is under contract at the University Press of Florida and will come out in 2008. We have a wonderful panel. Tad is going to join the panel. I think they're all going to say a few words about their experience, and then I think we'll open up for questions. Thank you, ladies.
Good evening. I'm here to tell you how wonderful this collection is. In 1977, Marian Marsloff published the book Up from the Footnote. The title is a reference to the few mentions of women in journalism history. In recent years, women in journalism have continued to be overlooked. In fact, women's page journalists don't even exist in the footnotes of their own newspapers' histories. Take, for example, the story of crusading women's page journalist Maggie Savoy Bellows. Dickerson Hartwell, publisher of the Arizonian, a weekly newspaper in Scottsdale, Arizona, wrote a 1963 column illustrating the impact of Savoy. A newcomer arrived in the valley not long ago. He was a person of cosmopolitan consequence. He'd been everywhere, knew everybody. He had spent only a few hours before he became aware of the subtle force which seemed to pervade the lives of people here. Wherever I went, he recalled the other day, all I heard was Maggie, Maggie, Maggie. It was damned annoying, all this Maggie business. When she finally called me for an interview, I already detested her and I told her so. She came anyhow. Now, like everyone else, I love her dearly. Not every influential newcomer finds Maggie Ann K. Savoy, the women's editor of the Arizona Republic, an annoyance. They sense in her a strange and mighty influence. They feel that behind her shiny, bright, and beauteous face, her glowing smile, that among the women in the valley, she is just not a figure, she is the key figure. There are numerous stories that echo that tale. A colleague of Savoy's once wrote, like some favor fine wine or opera, she savored people, fighting, sweating, swinging, action people. She may have been in the stepchild of the profession, which is what journalism historians call it, but she wielded significant power in her community, raising awareness and fighting for change. She was very well known in Phoenix. She does not exist in this 406-page history of the Arizona Republic. But her stories are told in letters and in speeches that are here in the Petty Missouri Award papers at the Western Historical Manuscript Collection. Her photos exist here too, so for those of you at the front row, you get a special shot. But all of the photos that I found that made these women come alive are here, and without those, they're not real people either. The National Women in Media Collection, established 20 years ago by women's page editor and later Gannett publisher Marjorie Paxson, allows women to be part of journalism history. For decades, the main area for women journalists at Metro papers was the women's pages. In this role, they often fought for the marginalized and helped communities develop in stories that were found amid recipes and fashion copy. This collection has allowed me to tell the story of more than a dozen women who worked in these women's pages from post-World War II through the 1970s, the years between the waves. These papers reveal deep friendships and societal fights. When Marjorie Paxson was fired from the St. Pete Times, letters reveal her pain and then the comfort she received from Fort Lauderdale's women's page editor Edie Green, who went on to found a battered women's shelter that is considered the model to this day. Letters between the Miami Herald's Marie Anderson and Dorothy Journey also reveal friendship and support from increased women in the profession throughout their lives. Roberta Applegate, another member of the Miami Herald, was the first woman to be a press secretary to a governor in 1940s Michigan. The nearly weekly letters that she wrote to her parents, located in this archive, reveal career struggles, an interest in fashion, and a love of food. These personal letters give us a way of looking at their entire lives, the frustrations and their victories, personally and professionally. In another example, often the Petty Missouri Awards, which recognize the top women's pages in the country, were greeted with congratulations by managing editors at their home papers. Yet, these awards also caused some women to lose their jobs because management felt that these awards were making them too uppity. Those stories are revealed in the letters from Florida Sun Sentinel's Beverly Morales, located in this archive. These papers reflect personalities. A regular letter writer was Edie Green. She traveled the globe twice in retirement, noting, "I only speak my own language of profanity, but I can say thank you and vodka and tonic please in any tongue." Miami's Marie Anderson has her columns here, the Monday musings that were in the Herald for a decade. They reveal her attitude towards management. She was once chastised by a managing editor for getting a haircut on Miami Herald time. She responded that her hair also grew on Miami Herald. These papers also reveal the complex feelings about feminism. Gloria Biggs was a women's page editor at the St. Pete Times when she was tapped to oversee the women's section of the New Gannett newspaper in Cocoa, Florida, Today, in 1966. 2 years later, she gave a speech to Gannett editors on how to attract female readers. It was also published in the Gannett newsletter. It was rather stereotypical advice. She recommended that they center on information, appearance, people, and emotion. She concluded with, I quote, "I'd like to emphasize that I'm not a feminist. I'm happy to have men run the show." Years later, she wrote a note on that speech to a friend. "I weep when I read those lines about not being a feminist. But then I realized in 1968, that's the way it was, the way I thought I was supposed to be." That note is available in these archives. Gloria went on to become the first woman in the Gannett chain to hold the title of publisher. This archive, like others across the country, allow for corrections of media history myths. In the story of journalism history, the press has been chastised for ignoring Betty Friedan's feminine mystique in the book review sections of their newspapers. But yet, a look through her papers at the Schlesinger Library in Radcliffe tell a different story. From a marketing perspective, she knew what she was doing. She was going to get much better reviews if she was reviewed by a women's page editor, and she'd reach a different kind of audience. Studying women's page journalists also allowed for a better understanding of how women negotiated change. On the first day of work as a publisher in 1980 at her second newspaper, Marjorie Paxson learned about one of the former owner's policies. She recalled, "He turned to me and said, 'You might as well know I have a policy that women can't wear pants.' This is 1980. And she said, "What?" Although she had planned to look every inch of the lady publisher and had bought numerous dresses and skirts, she decided to wear her lone pantsuit to the office on day 2. She said, "So the next morning at 8 o'clock wearing that pantsuit, I walked into the Muskogee Phoenix through the press room, through the composing room, through the newsroom. By noon, the publisher's secretary came upstairs and said, 'Everyone is asking if there's been a change, if they can wear pants.' So there was a meeting of department heads. She said she didn't care what anyone wore, as long as they were clean, as long as they were appropriate, as long as they were doing the job they were supposed to do for her newspaper." She later learned that many of the females went shopping that evening. The next day, of the 45 women at the newspaper, 29 were in pantsuits. She recalled the story got around the town quickly. She remembers shopping at Sears when the clerk looked down at her credit card. She looked back up at Paxson and said, "I'm so glad you let them wear pants." Her next move was to change her newspaper's stance against the Equal Rights Amendment. To finish, in a final anecdote about Paxson that shows how women were creating a new path for themselves in a new territory. Paxson had always embraced that leadership role, but she recalled it took her mom a while to understand. She had become known in her community for bringing her miniature dachshund Tiger to work. She had said that he was a small dog and he needed a name with a big ego. Her mother was shocked when she learned that Tiger was accompanying her daughter to the office. Her mother said, "I don't know what people are going to think. I don't know about you taking that dog to the office, Marjorie. What will they think?" And she said, "Mom, I am the they." The previous anecdotes are found in Paxson's oral history. The transcripts are available again in this archive. Maggie Savoy, who I mentioned in the introduction, died in 1970. In addition to her women's page journalism, which won numerous awards, she was the first UPI reporter assigned to the urban beat. She burned her papers in a fit of anger about the second diagnosis with a cancer that would eventually take her life. If not for the papers of the Penny Missouri Awards in this archive, her amazing story, told in personal letters, professional clips, and photos, would be largely untold. These stories are a part of journalism history, but ones that are left out of the historical record without the National Women in Media Collection at the Western Historical Manuscript Collection. These papers allow women to come up from the footnote and to truly have a voice. They show these women who are not simply reinforcers of an oppressed message or victims of male management, which is what journalism history says. Instead, these women's page journalists were smart, funny, stylish women with an appreciation for homemaking and a hope for a liberated future.